Hi, I'm Gary Jacobs, 71 years old, and you are watching my video series entitled Episodes in the Life of a Comedy Writer. For 25 years, I wrote comedy for television. A lot of funny things happened to me during those years, though in many cases, it was not so very funny while it was happening. Here's a perfect example of what I'm talking about. I have to give you a bit of background to set up this story. Now, when I went out to Hollywood to pursue comedy writing, my timing was a bit unfortunate. Variety television had had its heyday right before I got there and was in the process of dying out. And situation comedy wasn't doing all that great either. So jobs were few and far between, especially for newcomers like me. Now, my dream was to be a sitcom writer. And here's how you did it in those days. You would go to a show with a number of ideas you'd been working on for episodes, and you would pitch them to the producers. With luck, they would like one of them, work with you on it, and you would go off and write a first draft. With even more luck, they would love your work and hire you to be on staff. It worked a little bit differently for a new show, since you couldn't watch it on the air. Instead, they would have you come in, usually a group of writers, and you would watch the pilot. Then you'd go off, come up with your ideas, and follow the same routine I just described. Okay, so now I can get into the story. I was part of a group of writers that went in to see a pilot for a new show written by a renowned comedy writing team with incredible credentials, and I'm sure multiple Emmy Awards, people who I was in awe of. Now the problem is, I thought the pilot was terrible. Now some people are great at working on existing shows, but not so good at creating their own shows. Now, judging from the two shows I created, Whoops and All American Girl, I would seem to fall into that category. But I'll talk more about both those shows at a later time. So I've seen the pilot, I go home, spend a couple of weeks working on my ideas, and then it's time to go in and pitch them. So I walk into the room, and there are these two giants of comedy who I had nothing but the highest admiration for sitting before me. And one of them asked me something that I had never been asked before at any of these types of meetings. He said, "What did you think of the pilot?" Now, what you have to understand is I was incredibly naive, even for my age, which must have been in my early 20s. And it never occurred to me to lie. That would be wrong. So I thought about it for a few moments and I said, well, it wouldn't be the first show I'd choose to watch, but I understand what you were going for. Well, as ill-chosen as these words were, what I was actually thinking at the time was I was feeling guilty for not having been more honest about how bad I thought the pilot was. Well, no sooner do I get these words out of my mouth than one of the men, his jaw literally drops. And he says, well, I see no point in going any further with this meeting because I believe unless you absolutely love a show, there's no way you can write for it. Well, it was like I'd been punched in the gut. Here's this man who I so admired, and I had said something that had clearly devastated him. At the same time, there was something strange about this, that I, an absolute nothing in the industry, could have this impact on this giant of comedy writing. But it did. I was very shy and insecure at the time, but I was so shaken by what had happened that I was bolder than I would normally have been. And I said to the man, surely in all your years of comedy writing, you must have worked on some shows you didn't love. And he said, never. Another punch to the gut. I said, listen, I am a huge fan of yours. I admire your work so much. The last thing I want to do is insult you. And he said, well, you certainly didn't make me feel better. This was a right-left combination to the jaw and pretty much a TKO. And that's when his partner mercifully chimed in and said, I disagree with my partner, but I think it's best that we end the meeting now. Which I couldn't have been happier about. Can you imagine pitching ideas at this point? So I walked out of that meeting totally, thoroughly, and completely devastated. I immediately phoned my mentor. I'm sure I was near tears and looking for some comfort from him. Told him what had happened, and his response was, "You idiot! Do you realize what you did? You basically said his baby is ugly. Not exactly the solace I was looking for. So I call my agent, tell her my sad tale, and she says, "You idiot! You never tell someone their pilot's no good. What the hell were you thinking?" And then I slunk home with my tail between my legs. True or false? Took me no time to bounce back from that disappointment. But as you'll see in a later video, I did learn my lesson.